I'm Craig Cohen. Today on Houston Matters, what to glean from Tuesday's results in this week's political roundup.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Joining us for the roundup today are University of Houston political science lecturer Nancy Sims and Rice University political science fellow Mark Jones. Also this hour, longtime area film critic Joe Leydon joins us to discuss the enduring legacy of the film Casablanca. He's hosting a special screening of it later this month at River Oaks Theater in tribute to his late wife, Anne. Plus, we preview an upcoming performance at the Match that blends dance, vocal chants, and electronics. We'll start with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Winter Johnston. The latest round of primaries produced a number of closely watched results ahead of the midterm elections. In Wisconsin, a moderate edged out a Democratic socialist for the nomination for governor, helped by a late endorsement from the state's popular outgoing governor. Mayan Silver of member station WUWM reports.
Polls were showing progressive Francesca Hong up by double digits in the days and weeks before the primary. That's despite an endorsement from Wisconsin's Democratic Governor Tony Evers for her main opponent, moderate David Crowley. But the margins were narrower than anyone imagined, bopping up and down by tenths of percentage points. Some Democrats had concerns about her comments years ago about defunding the police and canceling Thanksgiving, which she's since backed away from. Crowley will face Congressman Tom Tiffany, who's backed by Trump, in the general election. He won the Republican primary handily. For NPR News, I'm Mayan Silver in Madison.
Stocks on Wall Street opened higher this morning as the Labor Department reported a modest slowdown in inflation last month. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose about 24 points in early trading.
The government's latest cost of living figures show that consumer prices in July were up 3.4% from a year ago. That's in line with forecast and a smaller annual price hike than reported in May or June. Gasoline and grocery prices both fell last month, although gasoline still costs much more than it did before the war with Iran snarled tanker traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. Lettuce prices fell sharply in July after an outbreak of foodborne illness prompted a recall of some leafy greens. Investors think the somewhat tamer inflation report makes it less likely the Federal Reserve will feel the need to raise interest rates when policymakers meet next month. Market odds of a September rate hike have fallen below 40%. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Rescue crews are still searching for survivors after Monday's magnitude 7.4 earthquake in western Colombia. More than 180 people are dead and hundreds remain missing. The disaster is an early test for Colombia's new president, who took office just 3 days before the quake struck. Reporter John Otis is in Cali, one of the hardest-hit cities.
I came across a pair of 5-story apartments that had been absolutely flattened. Henry Granja, who lives a few blocks away, happened to be right outside the buildings when the earthquake struck. So he's saying, suddenly the buildings just collapsed. I saw them fall down. My lifetime neighbors and friends were inside, but there was so much dust and debris that I didn't even know where to start looking for them.
That's John Otis reporting. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. League City voters will give input this November on whether or not they think the city should continue using flock cameras, which automatically read license plates to assist in police investigations. But the public vote will not be binding. City officials will use public input from the ballots to ultimately decide the fate of the cameras. League City Council unanimously decided to add the non-binding referendum to November ballots at last night's council meeting. New cottages are popping up at the future Margaritaville Beach Cottage Resort located along Galveston Island's East Beach. Our Juliana Washburn reports this is the first sign of tangible progress for the development that's been in the works for years.
Residents first learned about the 95-acre resort back in 2023. It faced controversy about its potential impact on wildlife and environment in the area, and some of those concerns have been reignited as residents see new progress. Sidney Farmer lives near the future development. He's worried about the new resort fitting in after seeing the new cottages.
It would be one thing if they were building freestanding, lovely homes and had a limited, amount of entertainment business. But I think it would really be detrimental to the ambiance of East Galveston Island.
Developers say the $800 million project will bring jobs and money to the island. The entire project is expected to be completed by the end of the decade and will include a hotel, beachfront cottages, lazy rivers, and pickleball courts. From the Galveston County Bureau, I'm Juliana Washburn, News 88.7.
And the National Hurricane Center is continuing to track 3 areas of possible development in the Atlantic right now. One of the systems has an 80% chance of becoming a tropical depression. As of right now, it is too early to determine officially any impacts it could have here. However, forecasters have previously stated that conditions are unfavorable should it head towards the Gulf. Something called the Bermuda High could send the system north back into the open Atlantic. That's an open question at this point. We'll follow it for you here on News 88.7. I'm Matt Harrop, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on News 88.7 and Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, we'll talk with Houston area film critic Joe Leydon about the enduring legacy of Casablanca. He is hosting a special screening of it later this month. Also ahead, we preview an upcoming performance at the Match fusing dance, chanting, and electronics. First, though, every Wednesday, we seek context and clarity about fast-moving developments in the world of politics. And joining us for today's political roundup are University of Houston political science lecturer Nancy Sims and Rice University political science fellow Mark Jones. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Craig.
Primaries were held in 6 states Tuesday. Among the Democrats, more progressive nominees won, and a 14-term congressman from Connecticut lost, while among the Republicans, Trump-endorsed candidates saw mixed results. Mark, what are your takeaways from Tuesday?
Well, as you mentioned, it was a mixed bag. In Wisconsin, I guess Thanksgiving is safe because Democratic Socialist Francesca Huang, who in the past had some doubts or concerns or issues and potentially talked about banning Thanksgiving, lost narrowly to David Crowley, a progressive, but not as far to the left as her. So that was one loss for the Democratic Socialists. In Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, though, who's not a Democratic Socialist, but is much more progressive than Angie Craig, a congresswoman who she ran against, won the Democratic primary for Senate there. And given the blue nature of Minnesota and Donald Trump's unpopularity, looks pretty well set to win in November, although she does face former NFL sideline reporter Michelle Tafoya, who is a really strong candidate for Republicans, so she might have some possibilities. And as you noted over in Connecticut, Mike Larson, a 70-year-old plus congressman, lost to someone who's in his 40s. So effectively, we saw once again the generational bug hit in the Democratic primary, where older, long-established Democrats lost to younger, more insurgent candidates, but also, even if not insurgent, sort of making the case that it's time for a generational change. So this candidate's been in office for a while, for 10 terms. He's in his 70s. It's time for some new blood.
Yeah, I'm curious about this where the split really lies among Democrats. Is it between left and far left, or is it between older and younger, or is it a combination?
It's a combination of both. I really do think, along with Mark, and I don't think it's just Democrats. I think it's Republicans and Democrats. The age thing has become so dominant in the election cycle, and we're seeing it across every state, both parties, and I think, clearly the Democratic, when you go with the younger candidates on the Democratic side, you're getting slightly more liberal or significantly more liberal candidates. And so that it's the younger crowd running against the older crowd. So it's a combo of both that's causing this shift. But, if you watch a hearing before the Senate, if you watch any of the Epstein hearings or you watch the Todd Blanche hearings or anything, you just feel like you're at a geriatric facility. And I think even older people are beginning to say, this is ridiculous, right?
Is that, though, something that will hold in the general election? Or is it, when we talk about the idea of generational change, that's a more hyper-focused concern during primaries about who are we going to put up to run, and any incumbents who win in their primaries are probably in pretty good shape heading into the general election.
All right. So in the primary, you don't have partisanship, and so you're voting based on other characteristics, and that could be age, generation, or ideology, political orientation, track records. Once you hit November, that's pretty much based on partisanship. That is, a majority of people will vote for Republicans or for Democrats, and it's based almost exclusively on the partisanship. Now, at the margins, there are some people who will be voting based on generation or personal characteristics or serial adultery or whatever the case may be. But most people are voting partisanship, so it's going to play much less of a role. And that's only in the maybe 10 to 15% of the races in November that are competitive. Keep in mind that with single-member districts of the 435 U.S. House seats, at most maybe 35 or 40 are competitive in November. And of the Senate races, maybe a half dozen. If you drop down to state legislative races, it gets even smaller. So we're really talking about a small segment of the electorate that's not purely voting partisanship in the small handful of races that are actually competitive in November.
All right. So when you consider all of those gradations, when we talk about something like a generational shift, we're still talking about a hyper-focused group of districts where people can be swayed a little bit one way or the other, and that's it, right?
But I think the Texas Senate race is a great example of that. You've got, a very young Talarico, fresh-faced as a state rep for a couple of years, fairly progressive, running against an older, established Republican candidate, and I think who is extremely loyal to Trump. And Texas has rarely been considered a swing state, but this year people are looking at it, and part of it is that generational shift.
I imagine, though, from some Republicans' perspective, Paxton, while older and established candidate, is an older established candidate for a different office, and they may see him, considering that, of course, he upseated the incumbent, John Cornyn.
Right. Who was even older.
Right, yeah, exactly. Right. So Paxton to them may be the fresh-faced candidate.
Well, in the Republican primary, that was one of Paxton's arguments.
The case.
That he was making the case that Cornyn's been here forever.
Right.
So it's time for a change. But it does, while in November, the generational effects are probably in a very small number of races, in these primaries, where it's much more wide open and we're voting in safe seats for Democrats and Republicans, I think there is much more of an effect. And we saw it here in Houston with Christian Menefee defeating Al Green. One of the principal reasons was Menefee's youth and the belief that he was going to inject new blood, new dynamism into the seat. And that's what an overwhelming majority of Democratic primary voters wanted.
And I would say that reflected in the Parker and Plummer race as well.
If we run the risk of reading too much into generational effects, could we also run the same risk in reading too much into political ideology and the idea that some candidates further to the left are winning some primaries, that somehow represents a nationwide shift among Democrats?
Oh, no. It represents the shift within the Democratic Party primary electorate, which definitely, especially under Donald Trump's administration, has moved to the left and has become much more vocal. And it's put moderates or establishment Democrats in a difficult position because they've always tried to balance sort of ideology with pragmatism, and that's much tougher to do with Donald Trump in the White House.
Agreed. I do think But I do think we make a lot out of these few victories of the Democratic Socialists that are not going to shift the overall Democratic structure in Congress.
And then, of course, again, to the Republicans and what we have been watching through all of these primaries, and we're now, well, we have maybe just a handful left now. I think 9 primaries left to go. That includes a second Democratic state primary in Michigan. In any case, we've been following each time candidates running against one another, and one of them has been endorsed by President Trump. One has not. Who wins, who loses? It's, again, yesterday was kind of a mixed bag. Have we seen enough to determine whether or not he still wields as much influence as he did within the Republican Party?
Well, he still wields quite a bit of influence. Now, Mike Lindell, the pillow, whatever, my pillow guy, yeah. I think that's out of loyalty. I mean, that's probably not somebody he would have endorsed because he didn't have much of a chance.
I don't know many people who even endorse the pillows.
Frankly. No, I always actually have to wonder how he has so much money. Do so many people buy those pillows? I don't know.
Maybe.
But, and Darlene Graham, it helped her in South Carolina, but I was actually surprised. She finished first and goes into a runoff in 2 weeks. But Ralph Norman was pretty close, and at the end of the day, she didn't dominate the South Carolina Republican special election primary in a way that I might have thought of with Trump's endorsement. That is, she not only got forced into a runoff, but she wasn't even close.
Right, and I do think that you're seeing some shift of what's next after Trump. And so that's showing up in some of these primaries is a little bit shift in direction. And it's happening on both sides because Trump has dominated our political landscape for the last decade with complete dominance. Even after he lost, he, caused so much chaos. So I would say that there's people looking what's next. And so I think you're seeing some of that reflected.
We are seeking context and clarity about developments in politics as we do every Wednesday. Today, we're talking with the University of Houston's Nancy Sims and Rice University's Mark Jones. More ahead as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. With over 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
Support comes from Asia Society Texas, presenting Bollywood Qawwalis, the songs you love, the stories you didn't know. Riaz Qawwali revisits cinematic classics and the traditional pieces that inspired them. August 15th, asiasociety.org/Texas.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. We're in the middle of our regular Wednesday political roundup. Today with University of Houston political science lecturer Nancy Sims and Mark Jones, political science fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Here in Texas, still another poll in the U.S. Senate race came out a few days ago. The Texas A&M Bush School and Recon MR poll finds James Talarico with a 4-point lead over Ken Paxton, based on a survey of just 619 likely voters between July 27th and July 30th. That seems like a questionably small number of people surveyed. And in fact, the margin of error for this poll is plus or minus 4.7%, which seems to me to be awfully high. I'm not a pollster, though. Mark, you are. Should we just ignore this result?
No, I mean, I think one of the things about polling is the more polls you have, the better it helps you triangulate where truth actually lies. If they're done by different groups using somewhat different methods. So I think the Talarico +4 is very valuable information because that fits in with what we're seeing from the Texas Southern poll, which was Talarico +2, Fox News, which was Talarico +3. They're all giving us the same result. But you are likely when you're at that small a number, it's possible for you to sort of get outlier results. And I think the real thing where we should have caution is when you want to drop down into the crosstabs, saying how did men vote, how did women vote, how did Black Texans vote, how did Hispanic Texans vote, how did younger Texans vote. There, those crosstabs start to get really small. And at that point, the air balloons in terms of it's not 4 to 5 points, it's more at 10 to 15 points. And that's from both sides. That means if I say something is 40, it could be as low as 30. And if I say something is 30, it could be high as 40. And so the overlap is such that you really can't talk too much about the crosstabs except for demographics that are massive, say where they represent 40% or 50% of the group surveyed.
In light of all of that, should we really only look into the details, into the weeds of surveys that poll 2,000 people or more, or where is the threshold?
Well, it really depends on how large the demographic is. So the answer would be, do I have in my crosstab at least sort of 200 people or 300 people? And the fewer people I have, the larger the differences have to be for me to say that it actually is a significant difference. So there really isn't an absolute number, but if you're looking, say, at racial or ethnic groups, like Hispanics or white voters here in Texas, for Hispanics in any survey are going to represent about 20% of the electorate. So you probably want to be at least a survey of 1,200 or 1,000. That starts to get you enough where you can start to say something about the Hispanic crosstab. But even there, say 10 in a survey of 1,200, that's not going to really tell you that much because they could cross over, and so Talarico could be ahead among Hispanics, but Paxton could be, even if the crosstab shows Talarico up by, say, 10.
Nancy, yesterday on the show, we rebroadcast a conversation I had back in 2018 with Anthony Salvanto, who's the main pollster director of elections for CBS News, been there for a long time. And he made an interesting observation in that conversation where he said, we have so much polling that is about the horse race and who's leading and who's not. He says, but the really good polls, the really good surveys that are helpful are the ones that also ask why.
Exactly.
Or those who can extrapolate from the numbers an answer to that question. Do you sense we're getting that at all, or is it just a function of being a few months from an election, all we're going to get is the horse race?
Well, honestly, I'm finding this proliferation of summer polling to be, interesting, but not predictive as much because so far advertising and campaigning at full speed is limited. We're not seeing Ken Paxton ads. I think I just saw my first Greg Abbott ad, but I've seen a dozen Gina Hinojosa ads. So I think what we're looking at is a moment in time. Come Labor Day, we'll begin to see the electorate tune in more tightly. We'll begin to see the barrage of advertising in all the races, and the campaigns will step up all their organizing efforts. And both parties are struggling. Democrats are struggling to unify everybody. Republicans, you've still got a large segment of Cornyn supporters out there kind of ticked off at Paxton. So I do think, his point about looking deeper in polls, I always love it when there's an issue question or two added into it. Like, why? Is it because of the economy that you feel this way? Is it because of some other reason that your votes are... Those are the best. I love reading those. And like Mark said, getting into the crosstabs and seeing if there's patterns that emerge between older, younger, men, women, etc.
Yeah, and one thing that's really helpful also is looking if the favorable, unfavorable, and not knowing enough about the candidates. Because when, for example, Vicki Goodwin, the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor, 2/3 of Texas voters don't know enough about her to have an opinion. So when they're saying I'm voting for Vicki Goodwin, it's simply because there's a D next to her name. They don't know much about her. And that's the case with a lot of the down ballot candidates. Outside of Greg Abbott, Ken Paxton, James Talarico, and to a lesser extent, Gina Hinojosa and Dan Patrick, the rest of the candidates running statewide are unknown to more likely voters than they're known to.
You mentioned, Nancy, that you haven't seen much in the way of advertising from Attorney General Ken Paxton, the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate. He is behind on fundraising. In fact, he was on Fox News this week calling for, needing more money. How crucial will it be for him to catch up on that front in these final 3 months?
He's really behind on fundraising in a way. Now, the question becomes, I think a lot of his advertising is going to come from committees, independent committees. So his fundraising for Ken Paxton for U.S. Senate is not good. But there's plenty of other money that will be spent. Lots of outside. There will be plenty of money spent to ensure that he strives for victory.
That said, Mark, do campaign ads still drive turnout the way they did in past election cycles?
Oh, well, for Paxton, the ads are going to be pivotal. I think, and as Nancy mentioned, they're probably going to come from super PACs. I think that right now, the Trump super PAC and the Senate super PAC are sort of in a game of chicken. Neither wants to spend their money in Texas. The Senate super PAC said, we spent $100 million trying to get rid of Ken Paxton. You endorsed Ken Paxton, so you spend it, and Trump doesn't want to now. But that money is going to be pivotal for Paxton, not supporting Paxton because he's pretty much unsalvageable for most voters. It's going to be to attack James Talarico, to make sure to make sure that Talarico's negatives rise by using Talarico's own words against him, things he's said in the past, positions he's taken, and then maybe distorting those a little bit as well, all with the goal of making James Talarico a much less attractive, a much less palatable candidate for centrists.
But getting back to my point about campaign ads and their effectiveness generally, more and more people have ad-free streaming. They don't have cable anymore. They don't see these ads as often.
Yeah, except for sports, Craig.
True.
And local news.
Local news. Yeah, sports and weather. Yeah. Sports and weather. I mean, people, you could be a full-on streamer, but even if I'm streaming a baseball game on Apple TV, I saw a Talarico ad, right? So that happens. I think there's still... in a statewide race of this magnitude, they're still effective. I would say, I think, I saw in a city council race earlier this year, a guy spend a ton on TV and it absolutely did him no good. So I think it depends on the level of race. But when you're looking at a statewide Senate race and you have to talk to all Texans, it's got to be one of your primary vehicles.
Last week, Harris County commissioners voted to increase constables' salaries to $305,000. That is the fourth such raise in 3 years, doubling their pay in that time. They now make more than Vice President J.D. Vance. There's just a point of trivia.
And more than county commissioners.
And more than county commissioners who approved those raises. How is it that Harris County constables wield such political power that's led to this?
It's their connections in the legislature. And I think the commissioners may not have even wanted to do this, but they realized that if they didn't, then the constables would just go to the legislature and mandate it. And the constables wield significant power with neighborhood and civic associations, and that gives them strength that translates well to legislative engagement. So they kind of have the commissioners over a barrel. But it's a significant pay for people. Some of the constables have, 100 or 150 people under them. Others have bigger numbers, but the sheriff has 5,000, and nobody comes near that and doesn't make that much money. So it's makes about that same. So it's a really challenging issue because they kind of have them. It's kind of like the firefighters in the city of Houston. The legislative control over the local, legislative influence over local control.
Anything you'd add, Mark?
No, I mean, I think it's the constables they've created these little fiefdoms where they both make money through neighborhood programs and neighborhood watches. They have good political connections, and they also make money through traffic, essentially outside of office buildings. There's a whole sort of cottage industry there. They're very powerful, very influential, and also, especially with Commissioner Briones and Commissioner Garcia up for re-election this cycle, they don't want to be seen or give their Republican opponents the ability to say that they aren't supportive of law enforcement.
In League City, the city council there has voted unanimously to place a non-binding question to voters on the ballot, asking them whether the police department there should continue using the Flock license plate camera surveillance system. This has been gaining a lot of attention in recent days from Houstonians, some of whom are critical of the city of Houston's use of them. Other municipalities are either having second thoughts or doubling down on their use. Why has this suddenly come to a head recently?
Well, a lot of it's a civil liberties issue and how the flock cameras are actually used. There's strong support for them when their focus is on catching a car where someone has committed a crime and is fleeing the scene. So for basic levels of control, or monitoring the entrance of people into certain areas to make sure if the car if there's a warrant out on it. It provides police departments with the ability to do things that they wouldn't be able to do with the manpower that they presently have, and it helps protect public safety. The concerns begin to come up with, one, are certain groups, certain demographic groups being targeted? And then also, more importantly, is law enforcement using this information for other purposes? That is, not just for sort of combating crime, but for tracking the movement of people. And is it creating a database that allows them to know where people go, when they're there, in a way that violates basic civil liberties? And we've seen some cases where people have, members of law enforcement have used them to engage in stalking of ex-partners, ex-wives, and others in a very harassing way because they can say, well, I knew that you were here at this certain time based on the flock camera.
Well, and I think flock cameras kind of quietly came into the market, and they got picked up and put in use, and people weren't really aware that was happening. And then a couple of bad apples, misusing the technology, brought it to a broader public attention. And now the public's like, what? You're watching me? Nobody knew this? Well, by the way, you're watched all the time. So,
yeah.
I've got a camera staring at me right now.
There was a guy when social media first came around, and his quote was, "Privacy? You have no privacy. You've not had privacy since we went to computers." So, it is what it is. It has helped a lot of crime fighting on the license plate tracking for burglaries and that kind of thing. But it is a big debate, and it's going to be fun to see what League City votes. And I think Conroe's repealing their flock cameras. So it's just a hot issue nationwide at the moment.
Nancy Sims is a political science lecturer at the University of Houston. Mark Jones is a political science fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
And just ahead, longtime Houston area film critic Joe Leydon on the enduring legacy of Casablanca and why he's hosting a special memorial screening of it this month at River Oaks Theater. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Listen to Here and Now. It's coming up today at 1.
PBS Drama on HPM+.
The dramas you can't stop watching. Now in one place. Stream on demand. Catch up on past seasons with Passport. Search HPM Plus on your smart and connected TVs.
HPM Plus.
Houston Public Media, in partnership with Texas Southern University, brings to you The Vibe. R&B, hip-hop, and neo-soul. Music that resonates with all ages. The Vibe on 88.7 HD3 and on the Houston Public Media app.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Few films have had the enduring impact that 1942's Casablanca had then and still has now. The movie, filmed and set during World War II, tells the story of a nightclub owner in Morocco who comes face to face with a former love and her resistance leader husband and has to decide whether or even how to help one or both of them escape the Nazis.
Whatever gave you the impression that I might be interested in helping Laszlo escape?
Because, my dear Ricky, I suspect that under that cynical shell, you're at heart a sentimentalist.
Oh, laugh if you will, but I happen to be familiar with your record.
Let me point out just 2 items. In 1935, you ran guns to Ethiopia. In 1936, you fought in Spain on the loyalist side.
And got well paid for it on both occasions.
The winning side would have paid you much better.
Maybe.
Humphrey Bogart and Claude Rains there in Casablanca. The film was a romance, a melodrama, a spy film, and more all rolled into one. It was also deeply personal for the people who made it, many of whom were war exiles and refugees themselves. And it's a personal one to this day for Houston area film critic Joe Leydon, who's hosting a memorial screening of it in tribute to his late wife, Anne, on August 27th at River Oaks Theater. Joe Leydon, welcome back to Houston Matters. Good morning.
Very happy to be here. And Craig, breathes there a man with a soul so dead that never once to himself has said, "Here's looking at you, kid."
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you saw Casablanca?
There was a time in New Orleans, my hometown, there was a UHF station, and they got a package of Warner Brothers films, and they would play them like 24/7. And I saw a listing for Casablanca, and I saw Claude Rains. He was in Phantom of the Opera. Peter Lorre. Oh, yeah, he was in The Rape. I'll turn it on.
Yeah.
And I thought it might be a monster movie or something.
In a way, it kind of was.
Yeah. I was young and naive.
Right.
And I saw it, and I immediately fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And so when Anne and I started dating back during the Peloponnesian War, it was on the bill at a revival house in New Orleans, the Britannia Theater, like the River Oaks Theater here. And I brought her along. It was the first time either one of us had seen it on the big screen.
Yeah.
And, of course, it immediately became our favorite movie. I mean, up until, her last days, we would still, I'm shocked to hear there's gambling here. And, and of course, Peter Lorre, Rick, you got to help me, Rick.
There are so many moments in that film, so many just visceral moments. But here's the thing. I'm also tacitly aware there are people listening to us right now who have never seen this film.
Well, as my mentor, Tom Bell at Loyola University once warned me, when you're writing a review, remember, there are some people who don't know how Hamlet ends.
Right.
So, I'm always, now...
Spoiler alert, not well.
Yeah. Well, the film critic and historian David Thompson wrote a book some years ago called Suspects. And it's a collection of short stories figuring out what happened to famous movie characters after the movie.
Mm.
And in his version of the universe, Rick and Captain Renault...
Who we heard in that clip earlier.
Right, Claude Rains, who John Simon once referred to as the greatest supporting actor performance of all time in Casablanca. But Rick and Captain Renault became very close.
Well, we all wondered. They walked into the fog together,
Yeah.
beginning of a beautiful friendship that could have been more.
But Ilsa,
Yeah.
Ingrid Bergman's character, she went off to the United States. Her activist husband passed away. She became a secretary for Doug Hammarskjöld. I'm mispronouncing that name, at the United Nations, and she was with him when his plane crashed.
Okay, so this is all very interesting, but not actually in the movie.
No. If you've ever wondered, I don't buy that at all.
It's interesting, though, the idea that this movie has taken such a hold on so many people through so many generations. People do muse about this. What would have happened to these characters?
And there have been so many, and I'm not talking about, the two unfortunate but deservedly short-lived TV series versions of Casablanca. There's so many movies, if you watch them, you go, this is Casablanca. They're setting us up.
Sure.
Robert Redford in Havana. It's a great movie, but it's also Casablanca.
Just Casablanca.
Yeah.
Why do you think this now 84-year-old movie remains a favorite for so many people?
Well, as you say, put this in context. There was a very anti-interventionist movement in this country before Pearl Harbor. There are a lot of people, Charles Lindbergh, didn't want us to get involved in that European code word, pro-Jewish war.
Right.
And there was even a congressional investigation into movies that they thought were trying to push us into the war, like 1939's, Confessions of a Nazi Spy, which was kind of, obvious what side of the fence, they were on. So I'm ashamed to admit how many times I watched Casablanca before I realized in the first scene where we see Rick and his, functionary comes by and says, you need to sign this. And he signs it. If you look very carefully in the upper, I think, left-hand corner, it's only a few days before Pearl Harbor.
Right. This is set just before Pearl Harbor. And the whole undercurrent theme of all of this, Rick is basically representing the United States. He is representing, should I intervene in this personal situation, just like should the U.S. intervene in World War II?
Actually, that's on target. But I'm saying, actually, it's also Rick finding decency. A sense of honor.
Right.
And it's
right.
almost like
he was shying away from the better nature in his own soul.
It's almost like you put on an old coat and you reach in the pocket and, oh gosh, there's a $10 bill. I didn't know I had that. And in the course of the movie, you see Rick, after he gets over his self-pity.
Yeah.
And look, you'd get drunk too if Ingrid Bergman left you. I mean,
right.
Come on.
Okay. And so let me put that finer point on this. So this movie is about a lost love suddenly showing up, and there is this rekindled fire potential romance between Humphrey Bogart's Rick and Ingrid Bergman's Ilsa, again against this backdrop of war and spycraft. And it culminates in the final, one of the final scenes in the film, their final scene together at an airport, which is remembered as one of the greatest endings in movie history. Let's listen.
But what about us?
We'll always have Paris. We didn't have. We lost it until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night.
When I said I would never leave you.
And you never will. But I've got a job to do, too. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of. Ilsa, I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that. Now. He's looking at you, kid.
And the amazing thing about Casablanca is they were more or less making it up as they went along.
Which is shocking when you realize that they won an Oscar for screenwriting, Best Picture, Best Director, and it was really, they didn't know exactly where this was going or how to end it.
Ingrid Bergman supposedly went to the scriptwriters or the build scriptwriters. There were other people who had a hand in it. But said, who do I wind up with? I got to know how to play this part. And they told her, Ingrid, we don't know yet. We honestly don't know yet.
But here's the thing. Your character doesn't know either, so it should be fine.
She was a method actress.
Right.
What can I say? And you talked before about how people who had fled the Nazi horrors popped up in the film. Well, of course, you have Conrad Veidt, who is Major Strasser. And that was another reason, by the way, I was interested in watching it as a horror movie fan. He played the somnambulist in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Okay.
And when he, immigrated to the States. For one thing, he had a Jewish wife at one point, so that was a good reason to get out of Germany. He said, okay, I know I'm going to get typecast as a Nazi, but I insist every time I play a Nazi, it's got to be a villain. Yeah. It's got to be the bad guy. And he passed away at a ridiculously early age in his 50s, not too long after Casablanca released. So, but it is amazing, as you say. It's like, okay, and there's always been this story that Ronald Reagan was considered for the role of Rick. Now, I've heard people saying, oh, no, that's, an old wives' tale. It was leaked in one of the trade papers at the time. I've heard other editors, oh, no, they were really, but some producers said, no, I don't buy him in the role. Would Casablanca still have the magic if anybody other than Humphrey Bogart?
So. I don't think so. I think there is something about the world weariness of Bogart's face as much as anything else. That he just so matches what this character and what this movie is all about.
And that, again, that's part of the transition, the evolution, whatever you want to call it, in the character. Here is this cynical guy. And, let's face it, there are a lot of people in the States who are cynical about, I don't want to get in that war or whatever. And he realizes, no, I've got to do the right thing. I mean, it's going to hurt me, but I got to do the right thing. And, of course, the war has already started, and, the United States has been involved in it when the movie was released. Yeah. But it is, it is a product of its time, but it's also timeless.
There is something, I will say, very contemporary about the dialogue. It is one of those rare films that is 80-something years old that I watch and I listen to the back and forth between characters, and I think, this is a conversation I could hear somebody today saying. There's something very natural about the way lines are delivered.
And when I taught here at University of Houston for the School of Communications, I would often screen Casablanca for students, and they always enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the students, and there's some that are looking at their phone or they're nodding off or whatever. They liked it. And, it does speak to us today, like it's always spoken to us. And in some ways, I think, we don't get it the way people in the 1942 saw the film. It doesn't have quite the same impact. It's like Gone with the Wind.
Right.
When she says, I will never be hungry again. How did that play with Depression-era audiences?
Right.
But also, as you've said, it's a universal movie. It's a movie we can watch today. We could probably watch 10 years from now, and it would still have that, like you said, the romance. It's a spy thriller. It's a melodrama. But it's also a reminder that, even the most cynical among us can be redeemed. And let's face it, we're all looking for a shot at redemption.
Yeah. For decades, Joe Leydon has written about, reported on, and reviewed movies here in the Houston area. And on August 27th, he is hosting a memorial screening of Casablanca in tribute to his late wife, Anne, days after what would have been their 50th anniversary. My condolences. I'm very glad that you're doing this screening, though. I think this is a wonderful tribute to your wife. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for letting me spread the good word.
And still to come, we preview a performance merging dance, vocal chants, and electronics. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues.
The fundamental things apply as
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Your impact on the programs you rely on. Search for your company and get started today at houstonpublicmedia.org/match.
Hello,
Hello, I'm Nicole Bergers, and I'm a beekeeper with B2B Honey Collective. As a beekeeper, typically I help people in Houston learn how to beekeep. I install beehives in their yards or at their businesses, and I pay them visits. We'll go into a beehive, we'll smoke them and inspect them, check them, make sure they're healthy and doing well, and give them anything that they may need. Beekeepers use a smoker, anything that can be burnt. I prefer burlap and pine needles. They put in a contraption with the bellows. It smokes the beehive. It will mask any pheromones that the bees are communicating to alarm each other that there is an intruder in the hive. And it keeps them calm, and it makes the inspection easy for the beekeeper. We'll open the lid of the hive and take a look at the different frames of honeycomb, inspect the bees to make sure that the queen is laying properly, that there are eggs in the hive, that they have enough food, and that their mood is good. So brood, food, and mood. The value that honeybees bring to a neighborhood is significant. A lot of people have beehives because they're gardeners. They bring a pollination to citrus trees and herbs and vegetables and flowers. So they make your neighborhood a beautiful place with the high yields of fruits and vegetables and flowers. And then as an added benefit, you also get surplus honey from those hives, and you can actually taste the essence of your neighborhood. And honey, out of any food made, has the most terroir, the most taste of a place. So you get what exactly your neighborhood tastes like, whether you're in the Heights or in Montrose or in Westbury. You get to taste what those neighborhoods are made out of, and it's a beautiful thing. I'm Nicole Bergers from Montrose, and you're listening to Houston Matters with Craig Cohen.
This week on This American Life, imagine if that's how you felt about your job and that this guy was your boss.
Today I don't feel like riding any rides.
This, by the way, is a staff meeting.
I just want to play all the games.
We go behind the scenes at an amusement park and meet the guy singing this song who is possibly better suited for his job than anyone I have ever met this week.
Just playing games.
It's on tonight at 10 o'clock.
Houston Public Media is a service of the University of Houston and is supported with your gifts to the Houston Public Media Foundation. More information available online at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
This weekend, NobleMotion Dance will open its upcoming season with an exploration of ancient traditions merging with modern technology. The production is called Chant, and it features live chanting by dancers integrated into the music through electronic manipulation. Yeah, I didn't understand that last part either. So let's find out what that means from NobleMotion Dance co-director Andy Noble, composer and multimedia artist Betty Khalegian, and composer and vocal director Carrie Francis. Good morning, all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Andy, what is this electronic manipulation part all about?
Well, we're going to let Badi talk about that a little bit as he's the composer, and we'll get into the specs of that. But I will say that this is such a unique collaboration. We're bringing together sculpture, multimedia, composition, and vocals and performance from the dancers. And we really want to invite the Houston audience to come in and breathe with us. And we're going to take them on a meditative journey. And by the end, they're gonna witness some big dance and a very multi-sensory experience.
Okay. So, Badi, explain it. What is the electronic part of all of this?
So we have multiple microphones on the stage that are hidden inside of these sculptures that our collaborator Herman, he designed for us. And the reason for it is we cannot mic every dancers. So, and we wanted to actually hear them when they're making sound, but also I'm recording in live and also processing the sounds of them to make part of the electronic music. As part of the composition also, we record the dancers making some breath sound and also sing, plus Carrie singing. And then for the composition, that's the material for all of the sonifications, all of the sounds that we experience in the piece.
Okay, so this is all happening kind of live. You're mixing it live? Is that a fair characterization?
We call it processing it, yes, because we are gathering this data from the voices, from the microphones, and let it go through different kind of processing to change the sound that we're experiencing in real time.
What kinds of sounds are we talking about? Are we talking about like the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica in the 1970s?
No, these are all of the sounds that the dancers are making on the stage.
Okay.
From the singing, from the breathing, from some like a vocal exercises that we practice with them, and we are trying to avoid any text in this piece. It's all, we call it mouth sound. So the sound that comes from the mouth, but necessarily it's not have any like meaning.
Okay.
And that's the perception that I had for this collaboration, because we want to build a world that this ancient things comes together with this modern technology, and we are imagining how the future of chant could look like. So that's the motivation for making this world.
All right. So, Carrie, in addition to being a part of the process of creating this, you're also performing some of it. You're going to perform a role called the originator. What does that entail?
Oh my golly, so many things. I think our perception of time in this project is really interesting. So Badi was just mentioning chant that is inspired by past traditions and yet could also be something that organically emerges in the future. And so I think my role is to try to inhabit both of those sort of temporal worlds at the same time, singing something that might feel sort of familiar if you're aware of some sort of global chant traditions, while at the same time not directly referencing any of them, not drawing directly from any single sort of practice, but rather sort of melding them in a way that, again, could potentially emerge in some distant alternate future.
That is a very difficult needle to thread. How did you go about doing that?
Oh my golly. Well, it's an ongoing process. I think we were just talking about this is our tech week, so everything is really congealing. I think for my part, I try to remember, at least in the contemporary classical music world, that the 20th century and sort of the 19th century along with it are aberrations as far as this hyper specialization and hard codification of roles, and the idea of the trouvère and this kind of wandering performer was one who was a composer and an improviser and a dancer and a mover and a storyteller. And so this sort of multi-hyphenate performer is one that has for so long been the norm. And only until really relatively recently have we split apart into many of these performing categories that I think so beautifully we're trying to stitch those back together in this performance.
And Andy, that's what it all sounds like. What does it look like? How would you describe it?
So Badi has designed some multimedia that is audio responsive, and the floor is going to be responding to the dancers' voices. You have that going on. You have Brian Ely, who's here, New York lighting designer, and filling out the world. It, I would describe it as both meditative and inviting. There's these sculptures on stage that look like cocoons that are very primal. And as the piece develops, it eventually turns into a protest. And so we're imagining all the iterations of how chanting can show up from celebrating life, the beginning of life, to a protest, and then the healing process that perhaps happens after the protest. So it's a journey, and it feels very episodic in that you kind of go into these different worlds. Each section sort of is a different sensory experience for the audience. It's really satisfying.
The world premiere of NobleMotion Dance's Chant is this Saturday night at 8, with additional performances August 21st and 22nd, also at 8 p.m., all at the Match. Andy Noble, Badi Kalegian, Carrie Francis, thank you all very much.
Thank you for having us.
And that will do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, and Mincho Jacob. Tom Carter was our technical director today. On tomorrow's show, NASA's Johnson Space Center will continue to play a key role in America's efforts to not just return to the moon, but long-term to establish a base there. And then on Mars, that's the vision anyway. A Rice biology professor says we have lots of questions to answer before we can do any of that. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us tomorrow for that and other Houston Matters.